Time travel, Bigfoot, and Hound encounter in North Carolina. My name is William Hoffman and lived in Atlanta, Georgia all my life. I am 19 years old and one summer I decided to stay with my Aunt Kippy and Uncle Paul, who owns a beautiful log cabin in the Smoky Mountains about 1 hour out of Asheville. Take I-40 west to Canton where the real smelly paper mill is located, and then south on 110 to some small community that's not even on the map in North Carolina. It was a vacation home for my aunt and uncle who lived in South Florida during the winter months, 6 of the year, and the other 6 months, summer, in the mountains. My father Ron, being a medical supply salesman, had business in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. So instead of driving my gas hog 1966 Ford Mustang, I got a ride with my father. We left that morning, took a small detour to my aunt and uncle's house to drop me off. He didn't stay long. He was hoping to make Wood, Philadelphia around 10 p.m. tonight. Me being a city boy all of my life, I was completely in awe. On the way here, at the size of the mountains and the beautiful wooded landscapes, finding myself wanting to explore all around my aunt and uncle's property. They lived on 16 beautiful acres that was mostly thick wooded forest, and I could hardly wait to explore it. The log cabin was a good size and looked new. The stream that ran in front of the cabin was somewhere about 10 feet wide and about 1.5 foot deep, with rushing water that never stopped. It was very calming to listen to, especially at night, when it was bedtime. The first day there, my uncle took me around some of the 16 acres so I would get the lay of the land. I remember the wind must have been blowing from the north, because I could smell the stink from the paper mill. It was like 1,000 people bent over and farted all at the same time, something you never forget. Out back of the cabin was a trail that looked like it was heavier used than any other trail leading away from the cabin. Followed that trail for about 10 minutes and came up on a field of grass and a lot of apple trees. All kinds of apples were growing there, green Granny Smith, yellow Golden Delicious, and all kinds of red apples, Macintosh, Red Delicious, and Johnny Gold, that were all delicious. After exploring the apple trees and tasting every type of apple grown in the field, my uncle told me he had to get back to work and I could keep exploring the area if I wanted to. Excitedly I said yes. I remember heading east and then north into trail had thick trees and brush on both sides. Just as I got to the end of the trail, I suddenly felt lightheaded and dizzy, along with a bright sudden flash of light all around me. Soon I recovered and found a deep canyon with an old wood house. Outside the house was a girl about my age and young boy playing together. I sat there and watched for a while until the young boy saw me and came over to find out where I came from. I told him my aunt and uncle had a log cabin not too far there and I was exploring the wooded area around their cabin. The girl introduced herself as Emma and her younger brother George. They invited me into their wood home, and I remember as I walked in it was like I had teleported back in time. There was no power lines coming to the house. Kitchen was a wood-burning stove with the old style of kerosene lanterns for light. The house had no internal walls, just rope tied from one wall to another with blankets folded over the rope to make rooms. Just then 2 older people came out from behind one of the blankets and Emma introduced them as her parents, John and Mary. I began speaking about my aunt and uncle that live on the other side of the mountain, when Emma told me they did not have any neighbors for miles, with her father confirming it. I look at her and her father in amazement that how could she possibly not know about my aunt and uncle's place. I told Emma that I had to get back to my aunt and uncle's cabin before sundown. Anna and George told me not to remain outdoors after dark, for it was very dangerous. They spoke of a creature called the Wildman being 9 to 10 feet tall and had dark brown and black hair all over its body and had the foulest smell to it. She also spoke of a creature that is a huge bloodthirsty hellhound at night. She also said this creature had glowing red eyes and a howl so loud it could be heard for miles that hunted human flesh. I remember thinking to myself, the creature that she spoke of sounded like a Bigfoot and the other sounded like something from hell. So I started back the same way I came so I wouldn't get lost. I remember just as I was leaving on the trail at the top of the mountain at the canyon's edge it got somewhat dark quickly with a sudden flash of light following, and I could swear just as I entered the trail I heard a strange noise, but as I entered the trail surrounded by woods and brush, the noise stopped and the sun came out and I could see the trail clearly I had taken to the canyon. I remember while walking home thinking how sad it was for them to live like that, no power, no radio or TV and no phone. It made me feel very happy to be living the life that I have. I got back to the cabin and my aunt had something for me to eat, just to carry me for a couple hours. She spoke of a community meeting tonight and afterwards there will be food. Uncle Paul was already over there helping to set up the town hall. As my aunt and I began walking to the town hall, only a half of a mile, I noticed the foul smell from the paper mill was no longer there. The wind must have changed direction, thank God. We got to the town hall and they had their meeting. It was more like a get-together for there was no town really, just people who owned land and homes in the area that got together once a month. After the meeting they bought out food and started playing games like musical chairs and whoever won got a cake, a whole homemade cake. I remember being very nervous when it came down to just two of us left. It was me and this really pretty girl named Elaine. Well, I won the cake but I turned around and gave it to Elaine. She seemed to be very disappointed when she lost, and it was only a beautiful homemade cake. Elaine thanks me and gave me a wink with her right eye and then a very big smile. All the guys that lived there did not like me. They called me city boy and were really upset that I caught the prettiest girl in the community her eye. The next day I decided to do some target practice. I have bought my .44 Magnum with a 6-inch barrel and was looking forward to shooting it. In the big cities you had to find a shooting range to target practice and some of them did not allow shooting a .44. My Uncle Paul gave me a .22 long-shot rifle to target practice with also. .44 shells are very expensive. I went into the woods with my .44 Magnum and the .22 rifle and made sure I got far enough away from the cabin and any other possible places where people might be. This time I went west from the cabin and was out for about 2 hours, when I heard something in the bushes making noises, like some animal sneaking up on me, and pointed the .22 rifle at the bushes and just about to fire, when Elaine popped her head out and said, "It's just Elaine from the town meeting." I told her it's not a very good idea to sneak around when someone is shooting a rifle, you could get yourself shot. "Why did you sneak up on me like that?" Elaine said, "I went to the cabin first and your aunt told me you were out here target shooting. I wanted to tell you thank you for the cake last night, it was my favorite and I was hoping to get to know you better." Elaine asked me what it is like living in the big city, in Atlanta, Georgia. I said it's great to live where there is everything you want to do, see, eat, and buy. And I asked her what is it like living in a small community like this one in the mountains and woods in the middle of nowhere? She said it is very boring with nothing much to do except attend school and help around the farm, but there been lately the talk of strange lights and sometimes strange noises in the sky and around the canyon. I jump in and said that sounds creepy, that's where Emma and George live, in that broken down wood cabin. Elaine looked at me with a puzzling look. There is no one that lives in the canyon. The canyon is a big smelly junkyard, it's a big dump and no one has an old broken down wood cabin there. Now I am the one who had a puzzling look on my face and remembered that Emma told me they had no neighbors for miles. I told Elaine I had met Emma and George yesterday at the canyon and I did not remember seeing a junkyard just before it got dark. I asked Elaine if she wanted to go to the canyon and there I will show you that you are wrong. She agreed, so we both headed toward the canyon's edge. We approached the canyon from another trail. This one was from the northwest of my aunt and uncle's property line. I was in shock when I looked down and there was nothing but junk. Old cars, trucks, kitchen appliances and rotted garbage, and it smelled so bad. Looked at the end of the canyon and there was no old wood cabin. Elaine looked at me and said, "I told you there was no family that lived in the canyon." I said to her, "I know what I saw. Was I in a different time or something? Because this doesn't make any sense." Elaine looked at me and laughed and said, "I don't think so." We made our way back to my aunt and uncle's cabin using the trail to the south. Upon reaching the cabin, we both walked inside and found my aunt in the kitchen cooking chicken and dumplings, my favorite. I asked my aunt if anyone has ever lived at the highest point of the canyon. My aunt replied, "Not for a long time. The person who sold this property to us, also the town historian, said that there is an old legend claiming the family living there in the 1800s was massacred by what they called it back then the Wildmen, which today we call them Bigfoot or Sasquatch. The only one survivor was the younger brother. But he spent his whole life being hospitalized due to the trauma he experienced."
You think this is funny?
He spoke of a huge hairy creature that killed his mother, father, and sister Emma, claiming when two different creatures that looked like a giant wolf that walked on its two hind legs, scared off the other hairy creatures, after hesitating for a few seconds, proceeded to carry off his family, and that was the last time he saw them. After the brother died, the land became abandoned because there were no surviving relatives. It became community property, and later as the community grew in size, the community leveled the old wood house that was there and turned the canyon into a dump, because the canyon was deep and was not visible from anyone from town. I thought to myself then, how did I see the house and Emma, George, and her parents John and Mary on that day? I must have been teleported back in time through a portal somewhere along the trail and then somehow returned to my own time. I have to go back and warn Emma and her family what is going to happen to them. I have to try to be teleported back again. Maybe if I retrace the way I went the first day, I can recreate what happened. It was around 3 p.m. when I decided to try to go back and see Emma again. She looked plain the first time I saw her, but now I am sure it is just the time period she is living in. Bring her to the future, like my time 2019, and dressed her in clothes of this time. I know she would be very beautiful, but I am not sure she would be happy in this time period. I made sure I tightened my .44 Magnum holster and loaded the Magnum just in case, and also grabbed some extra .44 shells. Now, knowing what is roaming around in that canyon, I want to make sure I have some way to defend myself. I left the cabin through the back door and walked straight to the trail that my uncle and I had taken on that first day. I got to the apple field and turned right and walked to the open trail and turned left into the trail just like I did the first day I was here. As I got close to the edge of the canyon, I began to feel lightheaded and dizzy again. Again suddenly there was that flash of light, and then everything went dark, and this time it stayed dark. By the time I recovered from the effects of the portal, I could see stars and the faint light from the moon. I must have teleported back at night. I looked down into the canyon and saw the old wood house barely by the dim light of the moon. The house was dark. I had no idea what time it was here. But looking at the moon position in the night sky, I guessed it was around 1 a.m. As I made my way down the canyon, I started hearing the sounds of a Bigfoot along with loud pounding. As I got closer to the old wood house, and I saw a shadow figure of a huge hairy creature that was pounding on the side of the wood house and was doing a large amount of damage, and I could hear Emma and her family screaming from inside. I yelled at the creature, and when it turned around I got a good look at it. It was for sure a huge Bigfoot, and it was full of rage trying to get inside the wood house. When it turned around and looked at me, he let out a huge sound and began charging me. I pulled out my .44 Magnum and aimed between the eyes and fired one shot. It slowed him down, but he kept charging at me, So I took another shot. This time he was a lot closer and I saw part of its skull and hair fly off its head with blood shooting everywhere. It dropped to the ground with a loud thud and this time it stopped moving. It was at that moment I realized there were two more Bigfoot staring at me. One of them looked like a child Bigfoot and the other looked like a female, its mother I guess. So the one I shot and killed must have been its father. I suddenly felt terrible inside, but he was going to kill me along with Emma, her brother, and their parents. Then from the far left side of my vision, the mother Bigfoot began to charge me with the intent to take my life, I guessed out of revenge for killing her mate. I pulled my .44 again getting ready to fire, when all of a sudden something came out of woods with red glowing eyes and attacked the female Bigfoot with such power and quickness. With one of its huge claws it torn deep into the female's shoulder, leaving large open wounds that were bleeding. It was just about to sink its huge teeth into her throat. With its back to me I emptied the .44 Magnum into the hellhound's back and side, just enough of an angle where it would not hit the mother Bigfoot, at least that's what I was counting on. As the mother Bigfoot pushes the hellhound's lifeless body off of her, she stared at me, not knowing why I just saved her life. She kept one eye on me and the other on her young child. I reloaded the .44. It was at that time I believe she realized I killed the male Bigfoot purely for self-defense. We both looked at each other wondering what was going to happen next, when we both put a smile on our face and realized there was no reason for us to continue fighting. Just then I heard something that can only be described as a hellhound howl off in the distance. It kept howling as it got closer and closer to the wood house. I yelled to Emma and her family to just stay inside until I gave the all clear. The female Bigfoot had picked up a huge log from a tree and we both turned toward the sound, waiting for it to strike. But, as it got closer it stopped howling and just growled, I guess to size the situation out, and it seemed to be intelligent, just waiting for one of us to let our guard down. We both stood there in silence just waiting, when I heard a noise behind me. Thinking maybe the hellhound doubled back behind us I turned around quickly to look. It was George peeking out the door to see what was going on. Emma pulled George back in and closed the door, but as I was turning back around it hit me with all fours, knocking me to the ground along with knocking the air out of me. I am not sure if I was paralyzed with fear or somehow it was able to paralyze me, grasping for air and trying to move so I could get loose from its strong grip. I thought this is it. This huge hairy thing from out of a scary movie was about to take my life. I closed my eyes as it was about to tear my throat out, when I heard a loud thud and watched the creature fall to the ground next to me with a real big hole in the side of its head with brain matter hanging out. The female Bigfoot had now saved my life and I was extremely grateful to her for killing the hellhound before it tore my body apart. We both got very lucky. For each hellhound that we killed, their backs were turned to us, making it possible to kill them. I began to get my feeling back again and noticed my right side and both legs had deep wounds that had to be attended to. As everyone was taking a deep breath, I sat there looking at both of the creatures and thought to myself, this is something terrible made in a laboratory. Someone sick enough to join a wolf, or whatever that is with a human. Sounds like something like the Archon reptilian alien race would do. Something that Emma and her family knew nothing of and I hope they would never have to find out. Just then I noticed the mother and child Bigfoot were dragging the male Bigfoot away, most likely to give him a proper burial. I really hope they can forgive me, but I really did not have any other choice. Emma and her family brought me into the wood house and dressed my wounds. Soon after I fell asleep and was out for a couple of days. Emma and George were also happy the female Bigfoot helped to save her family and William. Emma and George started leaving food out for the child and the mother Bigfoot at dusk the very next night. The next morning the food was gone and some fish was left there for them. The next night seemed to be quiet except for a little hoop sometimes, most likely mother Bigfoot calling her child. The next morning I finally woke up and was strong enough to sit up and eat something. I got some soup in me and asked Emma's father John to help me stand up. I quickly found that I was not ready to walk back through the portal to my time period. Emma told me of the new relationship they had with the mother and child Bigfoot. I was very pleased that we could coexist together here in the canyon and the woods and mountains around us. I told Emma I needed to get back to my family, that they must be worried sick wondering where I am. I started to feel very tired again and I wanted to lie down, and as soon as my head hit the pillow, I fell asleep. I awoke that night about 7 p.m. and after we all had dinner, I decided to sit outside and get some fresh air. Even got to say hello to the mother and child Bigfoot and try to thank her for saving my life. 9:30 p.m. came around and I noticed a bright light in the starlit night. As it got closer, the light turned out to be triangle-shaped craft with lights flashing under it, one that I was very used to seeing in my time, but was puzzled why here in this time period, why someone from the secret space program would be here, in this time period and space. It stopped over the canyon and just hovered there without making a sound. There was a sudden flash of light directed right at where the time portal was located and then a huge explosion. Now it made sense why they were here in this time and space. It was to keep me from returning to my time and talking to the world at what had happened to me. Destroying the portal traps me here in the 1800s and they never have to worry about me spilling the beans, you might say. I looked at Emma and told her I was going to be here for a while. She smiled and asked how long. For the rest of my life. That flying triangle craft just destroyed my way back home. Emma was happy and sad at the same time, happy that I will be here with her, but sad that I was trapped there without any way to get back home. It was then I realized I would be another missing 411 case, just disappeared without a trace of evidence. I started wondering maybe this has happened before and maybe this is what happens to some of the people that go missing. These hunters and campers may be walking through a time portal and did not realize that they're not in Kansas anymore and lost track of the portal, leaving them lost in another time period. At least I had written a note telling everyone where I had gone to. Not that it does me any good, maybe Elaine will understand what I did. The note read, "Gone back to the canyon the way I did the first day I was here. Going to search for Emma, George, and their parents to warn them of the danger they may be in. I know I am not crazy and I know what I saw. Like I said, something strange happened to me that day and I am going to check it out. I should be back in a couple of hours." News spread fast of my disappearance and Elaine rushed over to my aunt and uncle's cabin, and when she got to the cabin, my aunt let her read the letter I had wrote. After she read it, she made a mad dash to the canyon, not really knowing what to expect. When she got to the canyon's edge, she took a good look and was completely shocked. Down in the canyon was a beautiful waterfall, wide stream with beautiful green forest with a huge beautiful two-story log cabin in the middle of the canyon. It was at that time she knew I must have changed the course of time and knew that I had been okay and must have lived out my life in this canyon, where now a beautiful cabin stood, and it all belonged to the Hoffman family for years, and Emma and I had now our third generation of grandchildren living there. As Elaine was looking down at the edge of the canyon and she began to laugh to herself and said, "That city boy did turn into a good country boy after all, just look at what he was able to accomplish," and walked away from the canyon with a big smile on her face. She returned to William's aunt and uncle's cabin and tried to explain to them what she thought had happened. William's aunt Kippy turned and told her, "Thank you for trying to make us feel better, but we will keep hoping that he will be found alive until they actually find his body. Then one way or another, our family will have closure." Funny thing was, Elaine was the only one that could see the changes that took place, but the others in the community, especially the older ones and even his aunt and uncle, said, "Oh, the Hoffman families were one of the first families to settle in this area and have always been here." But Elaine really didn't care if the other townspeople believed it or not. On the 15th of the next month there was a city meeting, the city of Harmony, North Carolina. Elaine attended the meeting and was overwhelmed at the size of what now is a city, instead of small mountain community. During the meeting she saw to someone who looked like William Hoffman. When the meeting was called to order, the person stood up and said his name was Ron Hoffman. He was the mayor of Harmony, North Carolina at the young age of 22. The meeting adjourned and Elaine went straight over to the mayor and introduced herself to him. She thought to herself that it was like looking at William. He asked if she was new to their beautiful city and Elaine said, "No, I grew up here." Ron could not figure how he had never met her before, but he made sure he would keep seeing her from now on. Ron Hoffman, William's great-great-grandson, and Elaine, now 19 years old, began seeing each other every day and fell deeply in love. Soon they were engaged to be married. While they were making plans to get married, Elaine often visited the Hoffman family at the huge beautiful log cabin in the canyon. One day she was exploring the grounds alone, when she found a small graveyard on the canyon property and one tombstone that stood out from the others. It read William Hoffman, beloved husband of Emma Hoffman, father of 3 sons and 1 daughter. Born in the year of 2000. Died the year of 1858. As she read the tombstone she got chills down her spine, for this was the proof that she wanted, but she decided to keep it to herself and not tell anyone of the gravesite. Better to leave things as they are. Why stir things up now? The city of Harmony is a very beautiful place to grow up in and everyone who lives here is very happy. On the way back to the cabin, Elaine heard something behind the trees and making noises. It was hard to hear because the waterfall was nearby, but it sounded like some kind of language. Elaine moved in slowly to see what it was. She pushed the tree branch out of her way and began to scream. What she saw was the Bigfoot family that lives in the cave behind the waterfall, out to catch some rays from the big bright sun that was out that day. Elaine ran back to the log cabin and told George, one of Ron's brothers. George began to laugh and told her not to worry. They all knew they were there and they are perfectly harmless. George and his wife Anna put some pastries together on a plate. Anna said they love anything sweet, and Anna and George took them out to the Bigfoot's den with Elaine following him. Elaine was so amazed watching the Bigfoot family eat the sweet pastries, enjoying every bite. On the way back Anna told Elaine that later there will be some fish or a recent killed deer on the rear porch to show their thanks for the pastries. After Ron and Elaine were married in a beautiful church in Harmony, everyone who was invited went out to the canyon for the wedding reception. Ron had moved Elaine into the log cabin the night before and Ron slept in one of the guest rooms that night. The next day they both packed for their honeymoon, for they had a flight out of Asheville the next day. Back from the honeymoon and already moved into the log cabin in the canyon with the other Hoffman brothers and sisters and their wives and husbands. She had already been told of the family secret of the Bigfoot family that lives in the cave behind the waterfall, but hadn't been told of true story on how the Bigfoot family became friends. Elaine was totally amazed on what had taken place on that day. William went back through the portal. Elaine never told Ron that she knew his great-grandfather. She thought it was better not to. It's possible it will make Ron feel funny being with me. To this day they still share food together with generations of Bigfoot creatures. Both of us coexisting together the way God meant for us to do. In any type being there are always some bad ones, that's to be expected. Most of their kind are very good souls at heart, it being a Bigfoot or alien, it doesn't matter. Soon, Ron and Elaine started adding a 4th generation of Hoffman sons and daughters that will grow up here in the canyon, and will also from time to time be able to play with the child Bigfoots. With each generation the Hoffman family always makes improvements as well as enlarging the log cabin in order to house the whole family without any discomfort. With William walking though the portal left by the Cabal, secret space program, most likely left there to come and go to change the outcome of the Civil War, which in the time William was teleported to, the Civil War was not started as yet, but it has started for someone who was shooting for that time period. When William was teleported to the early 1800s and became trapped in that time, William changed the course of time in the future, meaning possibility that William has now created an alternate timeline or entered a parallel universe. Elaine was the only one who saw the changes in time, meaning she slipped into the same alternated timeline or parallel world. Thank God for Elaine. Nothing had changed for her or her family in the new timeline or parallel world. Meaning this timeline somewhat has been a very happy ending for everyone.
In some of the recent stories that I have come across, tell of stairs that lead to nowhere in the middle of the forest. I believe this is someone's attempted to keep hunters, hikers, and campers from walking through a time portal by accident. Like I said, someone could walk through one of these portals at ground level and before they realize they aren't in their time or they're in another parallel universe and have no idea where they first walked through the time portal, leaving them stranded there. There is talk of a forest ranger that was being chased by a wild dog, ran halfway up one of these stairs to nowhere, turned around and walked down the stairs and soon found he had been missing for 5 years. This story that I have told you today is purely a fictional story. Please, if you enjoyed my story, hit that like button and subscribe to my channel. If you have any true or fictional story you would like read on this channel, please to me by email at the description below this video. Thank you for watching.